If you clicked on this video, chances are you resonate with one of the three following situations. Situation 1, you never liked reading, or at least never liked it much. Since you were a little kid, adults have tried to force you to read, both at home and especially at school. And the more they tried to force you, the less you wanted to. Every time you did try to read, and it was often under duress, it was met with such internal resistance that you just couldn't enjoy it at all. And so all you wanted to do was get it over with. To this day, you still hold the belief that you're just not a reader, and the idea of becoming one this late sounds pretty hard to believe. Situation 2, you did like reading somewhat as a child, and you still hold memories of yourself, of your younger self, getting lost sometimes in a book for hours or days. But somewhere along the way, you just started feeling less and less pleasure while reading. And at some point, reading shifted from a pleasurable, voluntary, leisure activity into a chore. Now you're at the point where, after failing to complete and finish several books in a row, you kind of oscillate between deciding to give up reading just to not feel the guilt and the shame every time you give up on a book or can't finish a book, and also kind of like eyeing the books that are sitting on your shelf or in your shopping list. At this point, you're kind of losing the battle, and you feel like you cannot, in good faith, call yourself a reader. Situation 3, you've always liked reading, and you still very much do. You still very much feel the same pleasure every time you do read, but you're feeling frustrated because of how little you're reading currently in your daily life, despite the fact that there's so much you want to read, and despite the fact that a lot of your free time is spent on excessive screen usage, which ends up making you feel pretty terrible anyway. And despite being very aware of all of that and of the fact that the solution is quite straightforward, you just can't seem to get out of this situation. If you resonated with any or more of these three situations, then you are in the right place. I'm here to explain to you why you've been struggling with reading and how literally anyone and everyone can fall in love with reading, whether it's your first time or not. There are two main reasons why you currently don't really believe that you love reading or that you're a reader. The first reason is that a lot of us hold a very rigid and narrow view of what reading books entails and who book readers are. Reading is still to this day so strongly associated for many of us to school and academia and an academic type of intelligence. It is one of the many, many beliefs that gets formed and entrenched in our minds, and that end up shaping our worldview and reality without us really realizing it. But you gotta remember that that's just what it is, a belief. It is not a fact, and it is not a universal truth. I checked online what it's called when we do this, and it is sometimes called a false cause fallacy. And it describes the incorrect reasoning of saying that just because A is often associated to B, then B must inherently belong to A. For instance, just because a lot of boys do love and play video games, it doesn't mean that all boys love video games or that video games are inherently for boys. In short, it counters the assumption that correlation means causation or exclusivity. In the context of reading, reading has often been associated with homework, with school, with doing something that you don't really want to do, but that's good for you, with being nerdy, with being academically talented, academically intelligent, etc., etc. That absolutely can be true, but that only makes for a teeny tiny fraction of what reading can be. It's important to remember that reading is just an action. It's literally just a way of consuming information, but that information, the nature of that information can be anything. Technically, we all read stuff every day already. One of the most common problems that I've seen around me is that if you don't have the classical academic type intelligence, you might think that reading is just not for you. I say this because I myself have people in my life who just were never compatible with that academic, standardized, very classical structure, which in many countries is quite restrictive, asking children from a young age to just sit down, stay still, be quiet for 6, 7 hours every day and just listen and learn by heart. And because there's so many different types of intelligences and their specific type of intelligence didn't match that academic system, they never really had good grades. But outside of school, and especially after school, they blossomed into amazing business people, salespeople, artists, creators, craftsmen, speakers, thinkers, what have you. But I realized that to this day, a lot of those same people don't read or barely read at all. And upon asking them about it, I realized that it did in fact come down to beliefs about reading, and more precisely about their identity related to the perception of having reading as a hobby or being a book reader or a book person. I even saw this interesting trend online whereby there were two groups of people. One group of people online were saying that they were not proud of this, but they were kind of annoyed at people who would read in public because they felt that the person reading in public was just trying to look interesting and sophisticated. And on the flip side, there were people who kind of confirmed the first group's suspicions because that second group were making memes about how when they're holding or reading a book in public, they feel so interesting and smart and elevated. And this is the direct result of that association that we make between books and a whole personality. But in reality, why? Because for all you know, when you're seeing that person in the subway, they might be reading something far more simple and fun and less educational than whatever you're watching on YouTube. I'm not saying they are for certain, but what I'm stressing here is the possibility of that being true. Because again, reading is just a mode of consumption of information, and the format of our consumption of information does not dictate the substance, what it's actually about and talking about. Now, talking about formats and modes of consumption, this brings me to the second big problem, the tyranny of IG. And by IG, I do not mean Instagram, although Instagram is 100% a type of IG, but I'm talking about instant gratification. And I think this is really the main reason why people who don't like reading currently, even people who love reading, this is the main reason why they're currently struggling with reading. And that is because a lot of us today judge the pleasantness of an activity in its first 5 minutes. As we all know, the pleasure, which in reality is more the stimulation than the pleasure, but the pleasure that we get from TV shows, Netflix, any type of screen, our phones, social media, what have you, it's instant. You open one of these things and you are instantly faced with bright colors, sounds, visual effects, audio effects, voices, faces, movements, etc. It is extremely stimulating in an extremely short amount of time. However, and I'm sure that most of us are struggling with this daily, it is almost just as quickly overstimulating. This leads us to quickly feel drained, tired, and develop brain fog, which then prevents us from doing the things that we actually want to do and need to do. Reading is the complete opposite. You open your book, you have no sounds, no colors, no visuals, nothing. Accordingly, the initial stimulation is infinitesimal compared to pictures and videos. What this means is that it takes a little bit of extra effort to choose reading over any other activity. Sadly, when we are overexposed to means of instant gratification, we develop a much stronger fear of boredom, and especially, which is related also to a fear that if we choose the delayed gratification, it's not going to deliver on its promise. Whereas every time we choose the instant gratification, because it's instant, we just know that the stimulation is going to be there. Furthermore, since our brains, as a result of natural selection, our brains are geared towards energy conservation, meaning that we often extrapolate the tiny initial effort that it demands to really get into a book. And by extrapolating that small initial effort, we then judge that it's not a good use of our precious and rare time to relax and do whatever we want, because we already have to exert so much effort in our everyday lives without really having a choice. But that is all an illusion, okay? Because when you read something that you find interesting, after getting over that little hump, that little initial effort, the pleasure you're going to get from reading only goes up and up and up. And at the end of that reading session, you're just going to end up feeling fulfilled and relaxed and way more energized than after an hour of scrolling. Delayed gratification is what we have evolved as a species to thrive upon. You can think of instant vs delayed gratification or screens versus reading books as taking out loans versus giving loans. In the first case, when you take out a bunch of loans, you get a lot of money instantly, but over time, you just become poorer and poorer. When you give out a bunch of loans, you initially have to give away that money, but over time, you just become richer and richer. I would like to note that even though I am making all of these arguments, I too still very much struggle with all of this. I have now successfully managed to bring back quasi-daily reading into my life, and it's only because I've reaped such great benefits that I wanted to make this video. But trust that depending on the day, and especially the week of the month for me, there are many times where I still choose instant over delayed gratification. I still don't read as much as I want to, but baby steps, baby steps. What's important is to stay flexible and not give up completely after experiencing low moments. On a more positive and hopeful note, the truth is that the more you'll try again and the more you will read, the more naturally it will come to you, and the more you will do it just out of your own free will and volition, because like I said, you will be reaping the benefits, so you'll just want to do it more naturally. Now, enough about the problems. I'm going to give you 3 solutions so that you can bring reading back into your daily life with as little effort as possible. And the common thread between these 3 is that reading needs to stand a chance in our modern world against all other modern forms of entertainment. The first tip is to read what you love until you love to read. I got this quote from Naval Ravikant, shout out to him. This is related to the first problem that we talked about, namely the fact that we often associate reading with something that has to be educational or highbrow. The priority now is to let go of all of those beliefs and start shifting your perspective. Stop associating reading to being hyper-intellectual and scholarly and productive, and start associating it with relaxation, leisure, and entertainment. Because the point I'm trying to make here, the crux of this whole issue, is the fact that we associate reading with a productive activity when in fact it is competing with non-productive activities, with your non-productive leisurely activities. Meaning that when you've spent your whole day studying or going to work and doing all these things that you have to do, and then at the end of the day or whenever you have a little bit of time to relax, you have to pick an activity, You're not going to pick something that you associate with productivity because you just spent 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 hours doing that. You're going to pick an activity that you 100% associate with relaxation and fun. And this is why it is so important for you to read what you love at this point if you're struggling to read frequently or at all. Because unless it's something that you love, you're never going to choose it whenever you have free time. And if you don't know how to do that, how to start, there's kind of 2 ways that I do it at least. First is just pick an interest of mine and then find a book on that. Or try to pick kind of a feeling that I'm craving right now. Do I kind of want to feel thrill? Do I kind of want suspense? Do I kind of want to feel lovey-dovey? Do I want to laugh? Anything you want. For instance, in my case, I had been really struggling to bring reading back into my life for the past couple of years, even though I love it. And the way I finally managed to was last year. It was when I finally understood that I had to first just pick books that stood a chance against Netflix and YouTube at night when I'm tired and I don't want to do anything productive. For me personally, those were psychological thrillers, murder mysteries, detective stories. I guess one of the most famous ones is authors for that is Harlan Coben, but there's a bunch of other ones that are great. And to me, reading those is just as easy as watching a series on Netflix. Actually, right now, if I'm going to watch something that's 1 hour on Netflix, it's harder for me to stay concentrated all the time compared to reading a Harlan Coben book. Because the suspense, the mystery, you get your wheels turning, you get the thrill. I love it. After reading 5, 6, 7 thrillers in a row, by then, reading had really become just a normal part of my life, and I had reaped so many benefits, I'll talk about those in the last part, that I just naturally gravitated towards other types of books because there's only so many thrillers you can read in a row. It gets a little bit tiring. And reading all those books that I really, really loved rewired my brain in such an amazing way because now I do not associate reading with a chore at all. And I just see it as me consuming information and stories that I like. So now I really read a bunch of different types of books, which if you told me that a couple of years ago, I don't think I would have believed you. The biggest surprise to me is that I'm now willingly reading these authors that we were forced to read in high school and we were forced to analyze and write essays on, and that gave us a huge headache. And I thoroughly enjoy them. The key though, remove any pressure to analyze what you're reading, to find all the literary figures, to understand everything, basically everything that was asked of you when you read that book in school. You're not in school anymore. Nobody's gonna test you on this book. So just read those books in the hopes of just reading an interesting story. Because actually, I feel kind of dumb saying this, but when you remove all of that, those authors, like I get why high schools and education systems included those authors now, because when you remove all the pressure to find all the motifs, the metaphors, what you have left are really entertaining stories. For instance, I'm almost done with Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, and I just kept, all throughout the book, I was highly entertained. And also I kept being very surprised at how emotionally complex and emotionally intelligent the characters are, meaning that the author was also very emotionally intelligent. And it just, I don't know, I guess it surprised me that a Russian man at that time just had such emotional awareness and depth. And also, what I didn't expect to do was laugh. I giggled a couple of times and I never thought I would. I think past me with those beliefs that we talked about would have thought that me saying, I'm reading Dostoevsky felt a bit pompous, but now I just see it as me reading a super entertaining story. And seeing that someone like me of my generation, chronically online, a child of the internet, whatever you want to call it, seeing that someone like me thoroughly enjoyed this book, was entertained, was laughing, was relating to it. It made me understand why they have stood the test of time and why they are included in education systems. Because these authors were so talented that they were able to describe universal experiences that truly stood the test of time. And they often did so with sass, humor, eloquence, and wit. It's very satisfying and enjoyable. So yes, read what you love until you love to read. You know how we were told when we were younger that cigarettes are the gateway to other drugs? Well, you can kind of think of it in that way. Just find your genre, find your little niche that you love, and read that until find your gateway literary genre until you just love to read everything, or at least a variety of things. Now, the second tip is related to this principle, and it is the need for diversity. Because so many of us, and this was me until recently, have this preconceived notion that we're supposed to kind of read one book at a time. And we feel kind of weird about starting another book before the previous one is finished. And respectfully, that's BS. First of all, if the fear is that you'll forget or get things mixed up, that's just not true. Listen, we have spent I don't know how many years in school studying different subjects every single day and every single week, and just mix them up and study one chapter of each subject every day. And that really didn't cause a problem for anyone. It gets even worse when we get to college and university, because often you have your majors and minors, and so most of your subjects are very similar. For instance, if you study law, you study land law, tort law, public law, criminal law, etc. And within those classes, you're pretty much only studying statutes and cases, and somehow you don't get them mixed up by the time you have to write essays and exams, right? The same thing applies for other types of content. You'll watch TV shows and videos, and some TV shows, even more when there were only TVs, only air one episode a week. And in between those 2 weeks, you would watch other types of content and TV shows. And when the new episode came around the following week, you didn't just forget everything, or you didn't mix it up with some other TV show that you watched maybe the day before, right? Obviously, and this applies to everything, if you let 6 months pass, you might need a little refresher, but that's more because of time, more so than the fact that you're consuming more than one type of content. This is why, in addition to reading what you love until you love to read, the second big key is diversity. Diversity. Since on YouTube, Netflix, I keep saying Netflix because I use Netflix, but any streaming platform, you get to pick every day what you want to choose at any moment depending on your current mood, then you need to create that same possibility for reading if you want reading to be anywhere near as alluring as those other forms of content. I still read psychological thrillers, but I only do so now on weekends or when I have time in the afternoon, because I realized that reading them before bed was kind of too much for me. At night before bed, I now love to read just novels and a lot of stories about broken people who heal when their paths cross. I love that. And then I do have books that I read to educate myself. Like I said, they are definitely a part of reading, but just a tiny part. So I do have those books. For instance, I have my philosophy books, my psychology books. I'm kind of getting into history, economy, finance, slowly but surely. But when you find the right books, honestly, the good authors will make anything entertaining. And luckily, I have found those recently, so I'm loving it. And last but not least, when I'm going through tough times, I have my self-help books. If you know, you know. So yeah, doing that has worked absolute wonders for me. And no, let me reassure you, I do not get things mixed up between books ever. So I think You should give it a try, and I think you might love it. This brings me to tip number 3, and I would like to ask you to listen to this entire part before forming an opinion, because I know that some people are somewhat purists at heart, and I just say that because I used to be one. But let me just explain everything and you'll see. So tip number 3 is to buy a Kindle. I'm gonna give you a handful of reasons why Kindles are a game changer. They have been for me for bringing reading back into your life. First of all, regarding the point we previously just discussed, the need for diversity, this is the perfect object if you want diversity in your reading. Look at all the books I have at my disposition and that I can choose from, the selection that I can choose from if I want to read something specific anywhere and anytime. These are all my books. Thanks to this, you have multiple books on hand at all times. It is so lightweight and portable, meaning that you can just put this in your bag and go wherever. Because the thing is that I don't know when I'm gonna have, you never know when you're gonna have like a little 15 minutes, 30 minutes of free time. And also you don't know what mood you're gonna be in at that time. So just having all your books at disposition whenever you have a little bit of free time and you just don't wanna scroll, I love it. Okay, this is a really small one, but in all of these books, it saves your page, which for me is huge because I always lose when I use real books, not always, but historically I often lose pages. So yeah, I love that. For my fellow quote lovers, you have the highlight feature. You can pick any part of the book and make it as long as short as you want. And then you'll just have all of your quotes saved in one place. Amazing. Once you've highlighted a quote, you can also write a little note next to it for those who like taking notes. Another huge advantage, especially if you're kind of getting into reading and want to try out new stuff, is that it is low commitment. Meaning that, first of all, even the books that you do buy, the price is greatly reduced. But also, if you have Kindle Unlimited, which is very cheap every month, you have access to hundreds, probably thousands of free books. So if you kind of want to explore after reading a lot of what you're already familiar with, you can just try a bunch of books, and if you don't like them, it's okay because you got them for free. Okay, the next feature I'm going to present, I'm really excited about, and I think anyone would be. You can click in any book on any word, you just hold it, and it'll give you all the definitions. It's a dictionary. Do you understand how amazing this is? Like, imagine you're just in bed, you just woke up, or you're about to go to sleep, and you're reading this book. Nobody, maybe some of you, but 99% of people will not get up and go fetch a dictionary or look up online the definition of a word that they don't understand. This feature, I can't get enough of this feature. I learn new words every day, and it is so satisfying when you're just reading the book and there's one word that you don't get, you just click on it, and then, because sometimes it's so frustrating when you're too lazy to look up the word, but then you don't fully grasp the sentence. I don't know, I get really frustrated, but my laziness wins regardless. Now, regarding what I said in the beginning, if you're a bit of a purist and if you love the feel of real books and the smell, then nothing is preventing you from doing both. I'm actually doing both. Like, I'm reading this book and I'm using my Kindle. But if you are a bit of a purist, I'm recommending the Kindle because at this point, the priority is to read more over the format. And the Kindle is the perfect transition tool to bring reading back into your life. And it is perfect for those of us who kind of struggle sometimes to choose a book over a screen, because it basically kind of fools you because it kind of looks like a screen, and also because it's tactile, you kind of have that touch screen experience. But at the same time, it's the best of both worlds, because this on the eyes, and I have very sensitive eyes, This does not strain your eyes a single bit. I read this in the dark at night in my bed, and I can read for an hour and my eyes don't feel strained at all. Last but not least, let me share with you some of the main real benefits that I've experienced by bringing reading back into my life, as I thought that it might bring some of you some inspiration and motivation to really make it a priority to bring reading back into your life. Now, the first one is one that all of you probably already know about, is focus. But I still wanted to include it here because I already knew that reading improved focus and that our attention spans are getting worse and worse, etc. But until I started reading almost every day and saw just how much of an impact it had on my ability to pay attention and focus for longer and longer amounts of times in every area of my life, when I'm having conversation with people, when I'm learning things, when I'm working, etc., etc., I was mind blown. Number two is that it has made me a lot more present with others and in life. It has made me a lot more present with others because when you're reading, especially fictional books and novels, you are reading it from the point of view of a character, and the narrator throughout the book spends a lot more time describing things that they are observing about others rather than things that they are observing about themselves. And the more I read these types of books, the more I just realized that naturally in my daily life, when I'm speaking to others, I'll notice a lot more details about them, their appearance, their voice, their behavior, their expressions, because I have read all of those things described in other characters in books. It has also helped me be more present in my life and therefore more appreciative of my life, because a lot of authors, especially the talented ones, the more talented ones, are able to describe such mundane things that we all have around us every day and that we just kind of tend to ignore. They're able to describe these tiny little things in such a poetic way that it makes you kind of fall in love with life all over again. And so, yes, I am now more satisfied with my life, I would say, because I just notice little things a lot more because, again, they have been described beautifully in books. Number three is that your grammar and your vocabulary will improve immensely. And what I love about it is that you don't even have to really put effort. It's kind of like passive income. You're just gonna get smarter and be able to express yourself better without even trying and while enjoying yourself. It's a win-win. And the importance of this should truly not be underestimated because just like the author Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "The limits of my language means the limits of my world." Language structures our understanding of the world. Therefore, the more you read, the more you will naturally become able to express your thoughts, emotions, and opinions with increasing clarity and precision, which will make you feel so much more confident, powerful, and also it'll help you feel very connected to others because there's nothing quite as frustrating as wanting to share something that you feel quite intensely about and not being able to fully convey what it is that you want to express and share with that person. Number four is that reading will immensely boost your creativity because it will activate your brain, forming images, ideas, and emotions in response to words. Number five is one of my favorite, and it's the fact that, you know how sometimes we get a little bit annoyed at the idea that we're stuck with our thoughts and our brain from birth till death? Well, when you read books, and again, this happens mostly with fictional books and novels, while you're reading, you get to be someone else. And you kind of get to be in someone else's shoes with someone else's personalities, point of view, thoughts, emotions, history, And it's really fun, first of all. And also it does open your mind a lot because for the duration of that book, you really get to understand a whole other life experience. Number 6 are the very real and non-negligible physical benefits that I've noticed as I brought reading back into my life. First of all, the quality of my sleep, exponentially better. I knew it was going to be better than when I was scrolling on my phone in the dark, destroying my eyes as well before sleep, but it's really truly night and day. My camera died, so apologies for the lower quality of visuals, but the audio will stay the same. The second huge physical benefit that I've noticed is that reading is capable of lowering my stress levels almost as effectively as meditation or breath work or breathing exercises, which is huge. For instance, I'll have a stressful day and I'll come home and I'll sometimes feel like, because I had such a stressful day, I don't feel like reading. So I'll start scrolling. But as we talked about, social media, especially if you're already stressed, can make you very quickly overstimulated. So then I ultimately do decide to switch to reading. And in the matter of 15 to 20 minutes, the way my whole stress level comes down, my cortisol levels just drop. And it does so on a systematic basis. Like there's not a single time that it hasn't worked. So yeah, that is a huge physical advantage because stress is killing us all, people. So yeah, if you're struggling with stress, read more. Now, these are the main benefits that I've personally experienced, and I'm sure there's plenty more, but these alone are life-changing, so I would truly give reading another try because it's truly worth it. All right, that is all for today. I truly hope that this has motivated you to pick up a book and fall in love with reading, or fall in love all over again with reading. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.